It feels like a cruel joke. You love them deeply, yet they seem to vanish when you need them most. The silence from someone who claims to care about you cuts deeper than any harsh word ever could. That space between messages growing longer, your calls going straight to voicemail, the read receipts with no response. But what if this painful distance isn't a sign they don't care? What if it's actually the opposite? This paradox exists in relationships everywhere. The person who loves you intensely might be the same one who creates the most distance. It defies logic, yet happens constantly. Today, we're breaking down the psychology behind this puzzling behavior. We'll uncover the hidden reasons why the people who love you most sometimes pull away. These insights will transform how you view those silent periods and give you the tools to navigate them without spiraling into doubt. The truth is that love and distance aren't always contradictions. Sometimes they're two sides of the same coin. Understanding this connection is crucial if you want healthier relationships instead of endless cycles of closeness and abandonment. By the end, you'll see these painful silences in an entirely new light, and it might just save your most important connections. When someone loves you deeply, they feel everything more intensely. Their emotional world becomes magnified around you. Joy feels higher, fear runs deeper, and vulnerability becomes both precious and terrifying. This emotional intensity is actually proof of how much they care, not evidence against it. These heightened emotions create a storm inside them that sometimes requires solitude to navigate. Think of it like an emotional overload that demands processing time. While you're wondering why they've gone quiet, they're actually sitting with powerful feelings that overwhelmed their system. It's similar to how we process grief or major life changes. The brain needs downtime to make sense of strong emotional experiences. For someone who loves deeply, simply being around, you can trigger feelings so strong they need to step back and understand what's happening within themselves. This doesn't mean they're rejecting you, quite the opposite. They're taking the relationship seriously enough to want clarity about their emotional landscape. They want to show up as their best self rather than bringing emotional confusion into your space. Many people weren't taught healthy emotional processing growing up. They never saw adults model how to sort through complex feelings in real time with another person present. Instead, they learn to retreat, process privately, and return when they feel centered again. During these quiet periods, they might be asking themselves deep questions. Why do I feel so strongly about this person? Am I safe being this attached? What happens if I fully surrender to these feelings? These aren't casual questions, they're fundamentally about identity and safety. For someone with a rich inner world, processing emotions isn't quick or simple. It requires mental energy, introspection, and often solitude. The deeper they care, the more processing time they might need. Next time someone who typically shows love suddenly creates distance, consider that they might be honoring the relationship by taking time to process their feelings rather than bringing emotional chaos into your shared space. Their silence isn't empty, it's full of internal work that ultimately strengthens their ability to love you well when they return. Vulnerability creates an open door into our deepest selves, a terrifying prospect for many people. When someone loves you intensely, they've given you access to parts of themselves they usually keep hidden. This creates a fundamental risk. The more they show, the more potential for pain if things go wrong. Behind their silence often lies a primal fear. Showing too much emotion means losing control. They worry that if they fully express how deeply they care, those feelings might pour out in ways they can't manage. It's easier to create distance than risk exposing the raw depth of their attachment to you. People who struggle with vulnerability often had experiences where openness led to rejection or ridicule. Perhaps as children, their emotional expressions were dismissed or used against them. These painful lessons taught them that safety comes from keeping feelings contained, not shared. For these individuals, love creates an impossible tension. Their feelings for you grow stronger, pushing to be expressed, while their protective instincts simultaneously throw up barriers. This internal battle can be exhausting, making temporary withdrawal seem like the only manageable option. Ironically, their disappearing act might happen precisely when the relationship reaches new levels of closeness. Just as you share a particularly intimate moment or reach a relationship milestone, they pull away. This pattern isn't random. It's their fear response activating when vulnerability reaches threatening levels. Silence becomes their protective shield. By creating distance, they regain a sense of control and emotional safety. It's not that they don't want closeness, it's that closeness feels dangerous to their nervous system, triggering automatic protection mechanisms. Fear of vulnerability also connects to fear of dependency. Loving someone creates natural attachment and interconnection, which can feel threatening to someone who values self-sufficiency. Their withdrawal isn't rejection of you, but resistance to their own growing emotional needs. What looks like indifference is actually their struggle with intense feelings they don't know how to express safely. Their silence doesn't mean absence of feeling. It often signals feelings so strong they've become overwhelming. They're not ignoring what exists between you. They're trying to find safe ground from which to engage with it. From childhood, we develop specific patterns for how we connect with others. These attachment styles shape our adult relationships like invisible blueprints. While some people seek closeness when feeling insecure, others do exactly the opposite. They create distance. This pattern is called avoidant attachment, and it explains why someone who genuinely cares about you might suddenly seem cold or distant. Avoidant attachment forms early in life, typically when a child learns that emotional needs won't be consistently met. Perhaps their parents discouraged emotional expression or were inconsistently available. These experiences teach a powerful lesson. Depending on others is risky. Self-reliance becomes the safer option. Fast forward to adulthood, and these individuals bring this survival strategy into their romantic relationships. They desire connection but automatically activate distancing behaviors when relationships deepen. It's not a conscious choice, but a deeply ingrained protective response. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, moments of closeness trigger an internal alarm system. Intimacy feels simultaneously desirable and threatening. This creates a push-pull dynamic where they move toward connection until it reaches a certain threshold, then instinctively pull away to regain a sense of safety and independence. Signs of avoidant attachment appear in predictable patterns. They might seem enthusiastic about the relationship initially, then become distant after intimate conversations or experiences. They value their independence fiercely and may interpret normal relationship needs as clingy behavior. During conflict, they often shut down emotionally rather than engage. This pattern creates a painful paradox. Avoidant individuals can genuinely love deeply while simultaneously creating distance from those they care about most. Their withdrawal isn't about lack of feeling, but about managing overwhelming emotions that threaten their sense of autonomy. What complicates matters further is that avoidant people often choose anxiously attached partners who crave reassurance and closeness. This creates a difficult dynamic where one person pursues while the other retreats, intensifying both people's attachment responses. Avoidant attachment doesn't mean someone cannot form healthy connections. Many avoidant individuals develop more secure patterns over time through self-awareness and healthy relationship experiences. However, this healing process requires patience and understanding from both partners as old protective patterns gradually transform into healthier ways of connecting. Sometimes people who deeply care about you engage in an unhealthy but common behavior relationship testing. This often stems from insecurity and past disappointments. Rather than directly asking for reassurance, they create artificial challenges to see if you'll remain committed when things get difficult. Ignoring you becomes a way to answer their unspoken questions. Will you chase after them when they pull away? Will you fight for the relationship when they seem distant? Do you care enough to endure their absence? These tests aren't malicious by nature, but reflect genuine fears about whether your affection is conditional or lasting. People who test relationships this way typically experienced abandonment or betrayal earlier in life. Those painful experiences created doubts about their worthiness of love. Now, even when someone shows genuine care, a part of them questions it. Their disappearing act becomes a misguided attempt to verify what they hope is true, that you truly value them. This testing behavior follows a predictable pattern. Just as things seem to be going well, they'll suddenly become distant or unavailable. They might ignore messages, cancel plans, or create emotional distance. They're watching carefully to see how you respond to this manufactured crisis. Will you give up easily or demonstrate persistence? For someone engaging in this testing behavior, your reaction provides crucial information. If you quickly move on or match their distance with your own, their fears seem confirmed. If instead you remain steady, reach out consistently, and show patience, they receive evidence countering their insecurities. Relationship testing through distance often intensifies at pivotal moments after saying, I love you, meeting family members, or discussions about the future. These milestones activate deeper fears about commitment and worthiness, triggering the need for reassurance through testing. What makes this pattern particularly harmful is its circular nature. The person withdraws to test your commitment, but this withdrawal creates actual relationship problems. When you eventually react to being ignored with frustration, hurt, or pulling away yourself, they interpret this as confirmation of their original fear that you wouldn't stay committed. This testing behavior rarely exists in isolation. It usually connects to deeper relationship insecurities and communication difficulties. Someone who tests through ignoring you likely struggles with direct vulnerability and has developed indirect methods of seeking emotional safety and validation in relationships. Life demands attention from multiple directions simultaneously. Work deadlines pile up. Family members need care. Financial pressures require immediate solutions. Health issues demand focus. When someone cares deeply about you, they often feel responsible for handling these challenges efficiently before giving you their attention. This compartmentalization isn't about loving you less. It's about trying to bring their best self to you rather than their stressed, distracted, or depleted version. While this intention seems logical to them, it creates painful distance for those waiting for connection. Stress fundamentally changes how our brains function. Under significant pressure, people narrow their focus to only what seems absolutely essential. This biological response helped ancestors survive immediate threats, but wreaks havoc on modern relationships. Someone drowning in work or family obligations literally loses cognitive capacity for emotional connection. Many people, especially those raised with certain cultural or family expectations, develop a problem-solving mindset that works against relationship maintenance during stressful periods. They believe they must fix external problems before they deserve rest, pleasure, or connection. This mindset creates a hierarchy where relationship nurturing falls below crisis management. For someone operating from this framework, ignoring you temporarily feels like the responsible choice. They convince themselves they're protecting you from their stress, while simultaneously believing they'll be better partners once current problems are resolved. This dual justification makes the behavior especially persistent. What they often fail to realize is how connection itself could support them through difficult times. Instead of seeing relationship nurturing as another obligation, it could be a source of strength and resilience during challenges. This perspective shift rarely happens without direct conversation. Communication patterns established in childhood strongly influence how someone handles overwhelming responsibilities. People raised in families that openly discussed challenges together approach adult relationships differently than those from households where problems were handled silently and individually. Gender socialization also plays a significant role. Many men particularly struggle with maintaining emotional connection during stressful periods. They've been conditioned to solve problems independently and may view relationship maintenance as secondary to addressing practical concerns first. When someone who loves you becomes overwhelmed, their silence often reflects their struggle to balance competing demands rather than diminished feelings. Their withdrawal is situational rather than emotional. They haven't pulled away from caring about you, but from their capacity to show it while managing other pressures. Few things trigger social anxiety quite like the fear of being labeled too much. Our culture celebrates independence and self-sufficiency while often treating emotional needs as weaknesses. Someone who loves you deeply might paradoxically create distance, precisely because their feelings are so strong they fear overwhelming you with their attention. Behind their sporadic communication often lies a persistent worry. What if I'm more invested in this relationship than they are? This fear creates a painful internal calculation where they deliberately hold back, counting hours before responding or forcing themselves not to initiate contact too frequently. Each interaction becomes carefully measured rather than naturally expressed. People develop this fear of seeming clingy through various paths. Perhaps past partners criticize them for texting too frequently or wanting too much time together. Maybe friends tease them about being whipped or obsessed. These experiences create deep-seated fears about expressing authentic desire for connection. Social media and dating culture intensify these anxieties by promoting games and strategies rather than authentic expression. Advice columns and friends often reinforce the idea that showing too much interest drives others away. Don't text back immediately. Let them miss you. Maintain mystery. These common suggestions teach people to mask genuine enthusiasm. When someone cares deeply, this creates an impossible situation. Their natural instinct pulls toward frequent connection, while their fear of rejection pushes them to create artificial distance. This internal conflict exhausts them emotionally while simultaneously confusing you with their inconsistent behavior. Ironically, in trying to avoid becoming too dependent, they often create exactly the attachment anxiety they fear. Their deliberate distance triggers worry, making them even more preoccupied with the relationship rather than developing healthy interdependence. This pattern becomes particularly strong in people who previously found themselves in unbalanced relationships. If they've experienced giving significantly more than they received, they become hypervigilant about repeating that pattern. Their disappearing act represents an attempt to protect both themselves and you from perceived relational imbalance. What they're missing is how authenticity actually creates stronger connections than strategic behavior ever could. Their attempts to calibrate perfect levels of interest often backfire, creating confusion rather than comfort. When someone loves you but fears seeming too attached, their silence doesn't reflect disinterest, but anxiety about expressing the full magnitude of their feelings for you. Nothing feels more obvious than our own emotion. When someone loves you deeply, they may exist in a reality where their feelings seem so clear, so present, and so overwhelming that they cannot fathom you might not sense them. This assumption creates a dangerous blind spot in relationships where one person believes their affection is being broadcast while the other experiences only silence. Many people grow up in families where emotions were never verbalized, but were expected to be intuitively understood. If you loved me, you'd know what I need without me saying it, becomes an unspoken relationship rule. These individuals carry this expectation into adult relationships, believing real love shouldn't require explanation or verbal confirmation. Actions and feelings become disconnected in their minds. They might spend hours thinking about you, planning future conversations, or replaying past moments together, all while never actually reaching out. In their internal experience, this mental preoccupation feels like active love. Meanwhile, you experience only their absence. Cultural backgrounds significantly influence how directly emotions are expressed. Some cultures value subtle expressions of care through practical help or quiet presence, rather than verbal declarations or constant communication. Someone from such a background might show love through actions that go completely unnoticed if you're expecting words or regular contact. Gender socialization also plays a crucial role in this dynamic. Many men particularly struggle with direct emotional expression, having been raised to demonstrate care through protection, provision, or problem solving rather than verbal affirmation or consistent communication. They might genuinely believe their feelings are self-evident through these indirect channels. Pride often compounds this problem. Someone might think, I've already shown how I feel, I shouldn't have to keep saying it. This stance protects their ego while simultaneously starving the relationship of needed reassurance. Their silence becomes both a test and a statement. If you don't know how I feel by now, you're not paying attention. This mindset creates a particularly painful situation because the person genuinely believes they're loving you well while you experience emotional neglect. When confronted about their distance, they might seem genuinely confused or defensive, unable to reconcile their intense internal feelings with your perception of abandonment. Communication styles differ dramatically between concrete and abstract thinkers. Concrete communicators value explicit statements and regular check-ins, while abstract communicators rely more on established patterns and unspoken understanding. When these styles clash, both people feel misunderstood despite genuine care on both sides. Communication needs vary dramatically between individuals, creating natural friction even in relationships with genuine love. Some people thrive on constant connection, frequent texts throughout the day, calls before bed, and regular updates on daily experiences. Others feel suffocated by this level of contact, needing significant space between interactions to feel comfortable. Neither style is inherently right or wrong, just fundamentally different. Someone who loves you deeply might still need significantly less communication than you do to feel connected. Their periodic silence doesn't indicate lack of care, but their authentic rhythm of connection. While you're wondering why they haven't texted back, they might be feeling perfectly connected despite days of silence. These differences often stem from early family dynamics. People raised in expressive, talkative households develop different expectations than those from quieter families where independence was valued over constant interaction. For someone from a reserved background, space between communications feels normal rather than neglectful. Introversion and extroversion play crucial roles in communication preferences. Introverts often need to withdraw to recharge, finding extensive communication draining rather than energizing. Their love might be just as deep, while their capacity for constant contact is naturally limited. What feels like minimal connection to you might feel intense and sufficient to them. Digital communication complicates these differences further. Text messages, social media, and instant messaging create expectations of constant availability that didn't exist in previous generations. Someone who loves you might purposely disconnect from technology to maintain mental health or productivity, not realizing how their absence affects you. Assumptions about normal communication create particular problems. Many people believe their natural style represents the correct amount of contact, viewing others as either too needy or too distant. Without direct conversation about these differences, both people feel their approach is reasonable while seeing their partner's expectations as problematic. Work cultures and professional backgrounds shape communication patterns too. Someone from a field that values focus and minimal interruption might bring those habits into personal relationships. Their periodic silence reflects professional conditioning rather than emotional withdrawal. What feels like ignoring to one person might feel like healthy space to another. Someone might love you completely while genuinely needing days between conversations to function well. Their communication pattern isn't a strategy or manipulation, but their authentic need for balance between connection and independence. Relationships never follow a perfect formula. Someone's silence doesn't always mean they care less. Sometimes it means exactly the opposite. When someone loves deeply, they often struggle with the intensity of those feelings in ways that create temporary distance. Next time someone who clearly cares about you seems distant, look beyond the surface behavior. Their withdrawal likely reveals something important about their emotional world, communication style, or past experiences rather than how they feel about you. The greatest connections often require navigating these contradictions with patience and understanding. Love isn't always expressed in constant presence. Sometimes it exists in the space between words, in the silent processing of powerful emotions, or in the careful dance between closeness and independence. The key is honest conversation about these patterns. Share your needs while remaining curious about theirs. These discussions build bridges across different communication styles and emotional responses. If this video helped you understand relationship dynamics in a new way, please hit the like button so others can discover these insights. Subscribe to our channel for more videos that decode the complex language of love and relationships. Your support helps us continue sharing these relationship truths that can transform how we connect with the people who matter most.